Chapter 1. Julius Caesar, a republic of restless ambition. Long before Julius Caesar became a name spoken as both warning and legend, Rome was already a paradox. It called itself a republic, a system built to prevent kings, yet it ruled like an empire in all but name. Its citizens praised liberty, yet its economy relied on conquest and slavery. Its senate claimed wisdom, yet it was driven by rivalry, lineage, and pride. Rome in the 1st century BCE was not a stable state, it was a machine of ambition, and that machine required men who could master it or be consumed by it. Into this world, in 100 BCE, was born Gaius Julius Caesar, a child of patrician blood but modest means. His family, the gens Julia, claimed descent from Venus through Aeneas, tying their ancestry to myth. But ancestry in Rome was political currency only if one could spend it. Nobility without influence was a fading coin. Caesar's early life unfolded in a city thick with tension. The Republic had expanded rapidly across the Mediterranean, but its political institutions had not evolved at the same pace. Wealth from conquest flooded Rome, empowering generals and destabilizing traditional balances. Soldiers were increasingly loyal to commanders who paid and rewarded them, not to the Senate that claimed authority over them. This was the Rome Caesar observed as a boy, triumphant abroad, fragile at home. His formative years were shaped by the rivalry between two towering figures, Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Marius, a champion of the common people populares, reformed the army and opened political pathways for new men. Sulla, defender of senatorial power optimates, marched his legions on Rome itself, an act once unthinkable. Civil war followed. Proscriptions filled the city with fear. Names appeared on lists, and those names soon belonged to the dead. Caesar's own family was linked to Marius. That connection nearly cost him his life when Sulla took control. The young Caesar was ordered to divorce his wife, Cornelia, whose family ties were politically suspect. He refused. It was a small act, but revealing. Even at a young age, Caesar showed a trait that would define him: a calculated defiance. He understood risk, but he also understood the theater of conviction. Sulla ultimately spared him, reportedly remarking that in this boy were many Mariuses. It was both a warning and a prophecy. Forced into relative obscurity for a time, Caesar served in Asia Minor, where he first tasted military life. He displayed courage, earned decorations, and learned the psychology of command. But more importantly, he learned that Rome's future belonged to those who could command loyalty beyond law. A famous episode during his youth, part anecdote, part symbol, reveals his emerging character. Captured by pirates in the Aegean Sea, Caesar reportedly treated his captors with amused superiority. He joked that they did not ask enough ransom for a man of his worth. When released, he raised a fleet, hunted them down, and had them crucified, after mercifully ordering their throats cut first to spare prolonged suffering. Whether embellished or not, the story captures a Roman ideal: mercy combined with dominance, clemency framed by power. Caesar would later make clementia political mercy a personal brand. Returning to Rome, he entered the cursus honorum, the ladder of public offices. Advancement required wealth, alliances, and visibility. Caesar had limited money, but immense charisma. He borrowed heavily, hosted lavish games, and courted public favor. Debt in Rome was dangerous, but it was also an investment in reputation. Caesar wagered on his future. He studied rhetoric intensely, even traveling to Rhodes to refine his oratory. In Rome, speech was a weapon. Laws were debated aloud. Reputations rose and fell on persuasion. Caesar's eloquence was not merely decorative, it was strategic. He spoke to be remembered, yet beneath his charm lay discipline. Caesar observed men carefully. He understood that Roman politics was not guided by ideology alone, but by networks of obligation, patron and client, favor and debt, loyalty and expectation. Rome was a web, and he intended to stand at its center. At this stage, Caesar was not yet the conqueror of Gaul or the dictator for life. He was something more fundamental, a product of Rome's contradictions. He sought honor, but he pursued it through unconventional means. Young Caesar learned a crucial lesson early. Power in Rome belonged to those who combined popularity, military success, and political alliances. Any one alone was insufficient. Together, they were unstoppable. As he rose through minor offices, quaestor, aedile pontifex, Maximus, his name became more familiar. Some saw him as a reformer, others as a demagogue. Many underestimated him. In a society obsessed with lineage, his relative poverty disguised his potential. But Caesar understood something his peers did not. The Republic was entering an age where personal authority would rival institutional control. Rome's territories were too vast, its armies too loyal to generals, its wealth too unevenly distributed for old rules to suffice. The Republic needed balance. Ambitious men needed opportunity. History would soon force a choice between them. For now, Caesar was still climbing, still smiling, still learning. He was a politician among many, a noble among rivals, a debtor among creditors. Yet within him grew a vision, not only of success, but of centrality. He did not merely want to participate in Rome's story, he wanted to shape its direction. The boy spared by Sulla, the youth captured by pirates, the debtor hosting spectacles. These were not disconnected episodes, they were rehearsals. Each tested his resilience, sharpened his instincts, and revealed a mind comfortable with risk. Rome was restless, Caesar was rising, and the distance between the Republic's ideals and its realities was narrowing. Soon, ambition and circumstance would meet, and when they did, Rome would never be the same. Chapter 2: Julius Caesar, the currency of alliance in the Roman Republic. No man rose alone. Power was not a ladder, but a web woven from favors, marriages, debts, and mutual necessity. Ideals were proclaimed in speeches, but influence was built in private rooms. To survive politically in Rome was to understand that loyalty could be negotiated, but relevance had to be maintained. By his early 30s, Julius Caesar recognized a structural truth about the Republic. Institutions set the stage, but alliances wrote the script. He had already gained visibility through public games and religious office, notably becoming Pontifex Maximus, Rome's chief priest. This victory was not merely spiritual, it gave him prestige, a prominent residence, and lifelong influence. Yet prestige did not erase his debts. His finances were perilous, and his political enemies waited for missteps. Debt in Rome could ruin a career, but it could also bind powerful patrons to your success. Caesar's creditors tolerated his borrowing, because they sensed his trajectory. He was charismatic, eloquent, and increasingly popular among the masses. He positioned himself as a man of the people without fully alienating the aristocracy, a delicate balancing act in a polarized Rome. Still, popularity alone could not secure supremacy. The Republic's political arena was dominated by men with armies and wealth. Two figures towered above the rest: Gnaeus Pompeius, Magnus Pompey the Great, Rome's most celebrated general, conqueror of the East, adored by soldiers and citizens alike. Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome, whose fortune could sway elections and stabilize or destroy careers. Pompey had glory but sought political recognition and land settlements for his veterans. Crassus had wealth but desired prestige and military distinction. Caesar had ambition and public appeal, but needed both money and military command. Their needs aligned. Thus emerged one of the most consequential informal agreements in Roman history, the First Triumvirate. It was not an official body, nor a constitutional reform. It was a private pact among three men who understood that cooperation could outmaneuver the Senate's resistance. Each would support the other's interests. Each would gain what alone was difficult to secure. Caesar played a subtle role in forming this alliance. He acted as mediator between Pompey and Crassus, who distrusted one another. He also cemented ties by giving his daughter Julia in marriage to Pompey, deeply Roman method of political bonding. Marriage was diplomacy by other means. With the triumvirate's backing, Caesar secured the consulship in 59 BCE, the Republic's highest elected office. His year as consul was turbulent. He pushed through legislation benefiting Pompey's veterans and Crassus's financial allies, often bypassing senatorial obstruction. His colleague Bibulus attempted resistance, but was politically sidelined. Romans joked that the year was the consulship of Julius and Caesar, implying Bibulus was irrelevant. This period revealed a critical aspect of Caesar's style. He respected legality when it served him, but he did not allow procedure to paralyze action. To his supporters, he was decisive. To his critics, he was dangerous. Yet, even as consul, Caesar thought ahead. In Rome, office was temporary, command was lasting. He needed a provincial governorship that offered military opportunity, wealth, and distance from political prosecution once his term ended. He obtained command over Cisalpine Gaul, Illyricum, and later Transalpine Gaul for an extended period. On paper, it was a routine assignment. In reality, it was a launchpad. Gaul was not fully subdued. Tribal conflicts provided justification for campaigns. Campaigns provided victories. Victories provided loyalty from troops and glory in Rome. Before departing, Caesar ensured his political foundations were secure. The triumvirate still functioned. His allies still benefited from his influence. His enemies underestimated how transformative his Gallic command would become. For many senators, Gaul was a distant frontier. For Caesar, it was a canvas. He understood that military success could eclipse aristocratic pedigree. Rome revered conquerors. Triumphs could silence critics and rewrite reputations. A general who expanded Rome's borders was difficult to condemn without seeming unpatriotic. Yet there was risk. Long absence from Rome could erode political relevance. Rivals could reshape narratives. Alliances could weaken. Caesar compensated by sending detailed reports, commentaria, back to Rome. These writings framed his actions as defensive, necessary, and beneficial to the Republic. They were propaganda before the word existed, clear, factual in tone, persuasive in implication. Through them, Romans followed his campaigns almost in real time. He was not just fighting wars, he was managing perception. Meanwhile, the Republic itself remained uneasy. Social tensions simmered. The gap between elite and commoner widened. Veterans needed land, urban crowds needed grain. Governors exploited provinces. Corruption was discussed openly, punished selectively. Rome's system functioned but with strain. In such an environment, figures like Caesar were both symptom and catalyst. He did not create the Republic's weaknesses. He learned to navigate them better than others. The triumvirate itself was not built to last. It was an alliance of advantage, not ideology. As long as each member gained, it held. But Roman politics rewarded dominance, not equilibrium. For now, however, Caesar had what he needed: command, opportunity, and time. He left Rome not as its master, but as a contender preparing his claim. The Senate saw a governor managing a frontier. His soldiers would soon see a leader sharing hardship and reward. History would see a man stepping onto a larger stage. In Gaul, Caesar would test the limits of endurance's own and Rome's. There he would refine the art of rapid warfare, psychological strategy, and political messaging. There he would accumulate victories that made him indispensable to some and intolerable to others. The Republic believed it had sent Caesar away to serve Rome. In truth, it had sent him to become more than a servant of it. And as his legions marched north, carrying eagles and ambition across the rivers and forests of Gaul, a quiet transformation began. Rome still thought in terms of offices and elections. Caesar was beginning to think in terms of destiny. Chapter 3: Julius Caesar, the Forge of Gaul. Gaul was not a single nation. It was a mosaic of tribes: Celtic, Belgic, Aquitanian, bound by language similarities, yet divided by rivalry, honor codes, and local loyalties. Some tribes traded with Rome, others resisted Roman influence. Many fought one another as often as they fought outsiders. To the Roman Senate, Gaul was a buffer zone. To Caesar, it was an arena where military genius could become political capital. His governorship began in 58 BCE, and almost immediately, opportunity presented itself. The Helvetii, a migrating tribe, sought passage through Roman territories. Migration on that scale threatened instability. Caesar framed intervention as defense of Rome's allies and borders. But defense in Roman logic often became expansion. He blocked their passage, confronted them militarily, and ultimately defeated them. The message was clear: Rome would not be negotiated with from weakness. This early victory established Caesar's credibility among his legions. Soldiers respected commanders who delivered results and rewards. Caesar excelled at both. He marched with his men, endured harsh conditions, and shared danger. Roman soldiers valued presence more than speeches. Loyalty grew not from ideology, but from trust that their general would lead effectively and distribute spoils fairly. Caesar cultivated this bond deliberately, yet warfare in Gaul required more than battlefield strength. The terrain was vast forests, rivers, seasonal weather extremes. Supply lines were fragile. Intelligence mattered. Diplomacy mattered. Caesar often negotiated with one tribe while isolating another, turning local rivalries into Roman advantage. Divide and stabilize, conquer and incorporate. He also moved quickly, sometimes astonishingly so. Forced marches, surprise river crossings, rapid fortifications. His campaigns displayed operational tempo that outpaced opponents' expectations. In warfare, speed is a form of psychology. It disrupts planning and erodes morale. One of his most symbolic acts was the construction of a bridge across the Rhine. The river was a natural boundary between Gaul and Germanic territories. Instead of merely defending it, Caesar built a massive wooden bridge in days, crossed into Germanic lands briefly, then returned and dismantled it. Strategically, the maneuver gained little territory. Psychologically, it gained immense prestige. It demonstrated that Roman reach was not limited by geography. It sent a message. Barriers existed only if Rome accepted them. Back in Rome, his commentaries on the Gallic War circulated widely. Written in the third person, they projected objectivity. They portrayed Caesar as rational, measured, and justified. Enemies appeared formidable, making victories impressive. Allies appeared grateful, making Rome's presence seem benevolent. It was narrative warfare alongside physical warfare. Yet, Gaul was not easily subdued. Resistance coalesced under leaders like Vercingetorix, a charismatic Arvernian noble who united tribes under a shared cause. He adopted scorched hearth tactics, denying Roman armies supplies and forcing them into difficult conditions. For perhaps the first time, Caesar faced a coalition capable of coordinated resistance. The climax came at Alesia in 52 BCE. Vercingetorix retreated into the fortified hilltop city. Caesar responded with engineering audacity, constructing double lines of fortifications, one facing inward to besiege the city, another facing outward to defend against relief forces. Trenches, towers, traps, ramparts, an entire system built under pressure. When Gallic relief armies arrived, Caesar's forces were caught between attackers outside and defenders inside. It was a test of discipline and command. Roman engineering and coordination prevailed. The siege held. Starvation and exhaustion weakened the defenders. Vercingetorix eventually surrendered. Legend says he rode out in full armor and laid his weapons at Caesar's feet. Whether stylized or not, the symbolism endured. The unifier of Gaul submitting to the unifier of Rome's power. The fall of Alesia effectively broke organized Gallic resistance. Gaul would gradually integrate into the Roman world. Cities, administration, taxation. Conquest was followed by systemization. For Caesar, the results were transformative. He gained wealth, seasoned legions, and unmatched military prestige. But success created new tensions. In Rome, some senators grew uneasy. A general commanding loyal troops for extended periods posed a constitutional risk. The Republic feared kings, and prolonged military glory could resemble monarchy in another form. Meanwhile, the triumvirate began to weaken. Julia, Caesar's daughter and Pompey's wife, died in childbirth. Her death removed a personal bond between the two men. Crassus later died in a disastrous campaign against Parthia. The triangle of balance collapsed into a line of rivalry. Pompey drifted closer to the Senate's conservative faction. Caesar remained in Gaul, powerful but distant. Trust thinned, suspicion thickened. The paradox of Gaul was this: every victory strengthened Caesar and destabilized the Republic. His soldiers saw a commander who led them to triumph. Many Romans saw a hero expanding their world. His political rivals saw a potential tyrant in the making. Yet Caesar likely viewed himself differently. He was fulfilling Roman ideals: glory, expansion, protection of allies. If the system could not accommodate extraordinary success, was that his fault or the system's limitation? History rarely answers such questions simply. By the end of the Gallic campaigns, Caesar was no longer just a politician with promise. He was a figure of continental significance. His name carried weight across provinces. His legions were experienced, loyal, and attached to his leadership. The Republic still functioned. Elections continued. Laws were debated. But an imbalance had emerged. One man now held a concentration of military credibility and popular support that the old structures had never been designed to regulate. Gaul had forged Caesar into something new, not merely a servant of Rome, but a contender for its direction. And as the northern wars quieted, another conflict began to take shape, not in forests or hills, but in the political heart of Rome itself. The question was no longer how far Caesar could expand Rome. It was how Rome would respond to Caesar. Chapter 4: Julius Caesar, the line that cannot be uncrossed. By the late 50s BCE, Rome was no longer merely a republic managing an empire. It was a republic strained by its own success. Conquest had filled the treasury, but also widened inequality. Generals returned from provinces with wealth and loyal troops. Elections were marred by bribery. Street violence between political factions became common. Law still existed, but enforcement bent under influence. In such an atmosphere, the greatest fear of the Roman political class was not invasion from abroad, it was dominance from within. And Julius Caesar now stood at the center of that fear. His command in Gaul was nearing its legal end. According to Roman law, a governor had imperium military authority only within his province. To enter Italy proper with troops was forbidden. A general was expected to disband his army before returning to political life. The rule was not symbolic. It was the firewall between republic and military rule. Caesar's enemies in the Senate, increasingly aligned with Pompey, demanded that he relinquish command before standing for consul again. Without office, he would lose legal immunity and face prosecution for alleged abuses during his consulship years earlier. Charges in Rome were often political weapons disguised as legal principle. To Caesar, this demand was not about Lut, was about neutralizing him. He proposed compromise. Both he and Pompey should surrender their commands simultaneously. The suggestion aimed at balance. The Senate rejected it. Pompey, once his ally, now positioned himself as defender of the Republic's order. The alliance had become rivalry. Personal trust had become political calculation. Behind the scenes, senators debated not just Caesar's actions, but what he represented. Could the Republic survive if one man accumulated too much loyalty from the army and the people? Yet, could it remain stable if political factions weaponized legal threats against rivals? The system was eating itself. Caesar likely understood that once he returned to Rome as a private citizen, he would be vulnerable. Trials could end careers, reputations, and even lives. For a Roman noble, dignitas, personal honor and standing was not vanity, it was identity. To lose it was a kind of civic death. So the conflict narrowed to a decision that was at once personal and historical. In 49 BCE, stationed near the small river Rubicon, which marked the boundary between his province and Italy, Caesar faced a choice. The river itself was unimpressive, shallow, crossable, but legally and symbolically it was immense. To cross it with troops was rebellion. Sources record his reported words, "Alia iacta est," the die is cast, Whether precisely spoken or later dramatized, the phrase captures the moment's gravity. He crossed, not with a massive invasion force, but with a committed core. Yet symbolism mattered more than numbers. The act declared that disputes between Rome's elites would no longer be settled by debate alone. Civil war began not with a clash, but with a step. Pompey and many senators fled Rome, regrouping in the eastern provinces where they could raise forces. Caesar moved quickly through Italy, often meeting little resistance. Many cities opened their gates. Speed again was his strategy: prevent consolidation, maintain momentum. He framed his march not as tyranny, but as defense of his rights and the people as tribunes who had fled Rome, claiming intimidation. Narrative mattered. Romans were sensitive to the idea of liberty threatened by elites as well as by would-be kings. Caesar's propaganda portrayed him as a protector of popular rights against a narrow aristocratic faction. His enemies depicted him as an aspiring monarch cloaking ambition in reformist language. Both narratives contained elements of truth. Neither captured the whole. The civil war that followed stretched across the Mediterranean. Spain, Greece, North Africa, Egypt conflict moved wherever Pompeian forces gathered. The decisive encounter came at Pharsalus in 48 BCE. Pompey commanded larger numbers. Caesar commanded veterans hardened by Gaul. In battle, experience and cohesion proved decisive. Pompey's forces collapsed. He fled to Egypt, seeking refuge. There, in a tragic turn of political theater, he was assassinated by local officials, hoping to gain Caesar's favor. When Caesar arrived and was presented with Pompey's severed head, ancient sources claim he was displeased, even moved. Pompey had been rivaled son-in-law and once partner. Roman elite competition was brutal, but it still operated within shared cultural codes. Murder by foreign hands for political gain crossed a boundary of dignity. The Republic's internal conflict had spilled into the wider world. By defeating Pompey's faction, Caesar removed his most formidable opponent. But victory did not restore the Republic to its earlier balance. It shifted the center of gravity toward one man's authority. Caesar had not declared himself king. He had not abolished institutions. Yet the precedent was set. Military power could resolve political deadlock. The Rubicon crossing was not merely a tactical move. It was a philosophical rupture. It asked a question Rome had long avoided. What happens when the mechanisms of compromise fail in a competitive, aristocratic republic? Caesar answered with action. History would answer with consequence. From this point forward, Rome would never fully return to its earlier political innocence. Generals had seen what was possible. Soldiers had learned where loyalty could lead. Citizens had witnessed how quickly norms could bend. The line that could not be crossed had been crossed, and the Republic, though still standing, had been altered at its core. Caesar moved towards supremacy not because he alone desired power, but because Rome's structure allowed ambition to escalate without safe resolution. He was both agent and product of transformation. The Civil War was not yet over, but its direction was clear. Caesar was no longer just competing within the Republic. He was redefining its limits. Chapter 5. Julius Caesar, master of a broken republic. Victory in civil war does not restore order. It reveals what order depended upon. After Pharsalus and the death of Pompey, Julius Caesar stood as the most powerful Roman alive. Yet supremacy in Rome was never simple. The Republic still existed, its magistracies, its senate, its traditions. Caesar could not openly discard them without provoking resistance. He had to rule a system he had helped destabilize. His challenge was paradoxical: how to hold extraordinary power in a state built to prevent it. Caesar moved swiftly across the Mediterranean, extinguishing remaining Pompeian resistance. In Egypt, he intervened in a dynastic dispute between Cleopatra VII and her brother Ptolemy XIII. This episode was not mere romance. As later legend emphasized, it was strategic. Egypt was wealthy, agriculturally vital, and politically useful. Supporting Cleopatra ensured a friendly regime and reliable grain supply for Rome. Their alliance, personal and political, symbolized Caesar's widening sphere of influence. Rome's internal struggle had now become entangled with the politics of ancient kingdoms. Campaigns followed in Asia Minor and North Africa. At Zela, after a rapid victory, Caesar reportedly summarized the battle with the famous phrase, "Veni, vidi vici," I came, I saw, I conquered, whether polished later or not. The line conveyed his style, decisiveness, speed, and rhetorical clarity. By 46 BCE, organized opposition had largely collapsed. Caesar returned to Rome not as a mere victor, but as arbiter of the state's future. He celebrated multiple triumphs, grand processions, displaying spoils and captives. Triumphs were traditional honors, yet the scale and frequency signaled something new. Rome had seen great generals before, but rarely one who dominated every frontier at once. Still, Caesar did not declare kingship. Romans despised the title rex. Their political culture was shaped by a foundational myth: the expulsion of kings centuries earlier. Any hint of monarchy triggered suspicion. So Caesar accumulated offices instead. He became dictator, first temporarily, then for extended terms, eventually dictator perpetuo, dictator in perpetuity. The dictatorship was a legal Roman office meant for emergencies. Caesar stretched its duration beyond precedent. Legality remained, but its spirit evolved. He also took on censorship powers, influence over magistrate appointments, and control of provincial assignments. In effect, he centralized authority while preserving republican vocabulary. This was political innovation, rule without renaming the system. Yet Caesar was not idle in governance. He pursued reforms with energy. Calendar reform created the Julian calendar, aligning civic time with solar reality. This change outlived him by millennia. Debt adjustments aimed to stabilize post-war finances. Colonies for veterans and the poor reduced urban pressure and rewarded loyalty. Expansion of the Senate diluted old aristocratic dominance and integrated provincial elites. Administrative reforms improved provincial governance and tax systems. To supporters, these were rational modernizations. To critics, they were power consolidation disguised as reform. Both interpretations carried truth. Caesar believed Rome required stronger central coordination. The Republic's mechanisms struggled to govern a vast empire. Deliberation was slow, corruption common. He saw efficiency as necessity. But efficiency in politics often concentrates authority. Public reaction was mixed. Many common citizens admired him. He provided grain, games, and stability. Veterans were loyal. Provincial communities benefited from clearer administration. Yet among traditional elites, unease deepened. Roman aristocrats valued competition among peers. Caesar's dominance ended meaningful competition. Honors piled upon him: statues, titles, privileges, Some were granted by allies, others accepted by Caesar, perhaps too readily. Symbolism mattered deeply in Roman culture. A golden chair in the Senate, a laurel wreath worn frequently, his image on coins. Each signaled exceptional status. None alone declared monarchy, but together they suggested elevation above equals. There were also whispers that he desired kingship, perhaps in the eastern provinces where the title was less taboo. Whether he truly intended this remains debated. What mattered politically was perception. The Republic's elite feared not just tyranny, but Caesar's clementia. His policy of forgiving former enemies was famous. He pardoned many Pompeians, allowing them to return to public life. It was humane and strategic, reducing cycles of revenge. Yet, clemency also placed recipients in moral debt to him. Forgiveness can be a form of dominance. It establishes hierarchy between giver and receiver. Some accepted this new order pragmatically. Others felt humiliated by it. Roman honor culture made submission psychologically heavy, even if politically sensible. Thus, beneath the surface of stability, tension accumulated. The Republic functioned, but its internal equilibrium was altered. Power flowed through Caesar, even when exercised through offices. He was not destroying Rome, he was reshaping how it operated. But transformation without consensus invites backlash. By 45 BCE, after final victories in Spain, Caesar was effectively unrivaled. The question was no longer whether he would lead Rome, but what form that leadership would take, and whether Rome's political culture could adapt. History often focuses on his ambition, yet structural forces mattered equally. The Republic had outgrown its city-state origins. Its empire demanded coordination beyond annual magistracies and rival factions. Caesar embodied one answer: centralized, charismatic authority operating within republican forms. Whether this was solution or problem depended on perspective. What is certain is this: as his power peaked, so did anxiety among those who defined themselves as guardians of the old order. Rome had gained a master, but not everyone wished to be mastered. And in the quiet corners of senatorial conversation, a dangerous idea began to take shape. History would soon test that belief. Chapter 6. Julius Caesar, the theater of power. Power in Rome was never only exercised, it was displayed. The Roman political world was deeply theatrical, not in the sense of falsehood, but in the sense that symbols, rituals, and public gestures shaped legitimacy. Authority required visibility. A leader had to be seen as powerful, but not too powerful, honored, but not divine, exceptional, but not king. By 45 to 44 BCE, Julius Caesar stood at the peak of his influence. He had defeated rivals, stabilized provinces, and introduced reforms. Yet the very visibility of his success created a new battlefield: perception. Every honor granted to him became politically charged. The Senate, whether out of gratitude, calculation, or fear, voted him unprecedented distinctions. His statues appeared among those of kings. His birthday became a public festival. He was granted the right to wear triumphal dress at public events. A special chair, resembling a throne, was reserved for him in the Senate. Individually, each honor could be defended. Collectively, they suggested elevation beyond citizen equality. Roman political culture was hypersensitive to monarchy. The Republic defined itself against kingship. Even the rumor of royal aspiration could ignite hostility. Thus, symbolism was not superficial, it was constitutional psychology. Caesar, for his part, seemed to accept many honors with a mix of pragmatism and detachment. He may have believed that visible authority discouraged further civil war. If one figure stood clearly above competition, perhaps rivalry would cool. But Roman aristocrats did not seek peace through hierarchy. They sought dignity through parity. One famous episode captured this tension. During a public festival, Mark Antony offered Caesar a diadema symbol associated with kingship. Caesar refused it, reportedly to public approval. Yet the very staging of the moment raised suspicion. Was it a test of reaction, a rehearsal, or simply political theater misread by anxious observers? In politics, intention matters less than interpretation. Caesar also pursued long-term plans. He envisioned campaigns against Parthia, administrative restructuring, and perhaps codified legal reforms. His mind remained active, future-oriented. He did not behave like a man satisfied with power already gained. He behaved like one still designing history. Yet while he looked outward, resentment grew inward. Some senators felt sidelined. Others feared permanent subordination. A few genuinely believed the Republic's liberty was eroding. Motivations varied: idealism, wounded pride, political survival, but they converged toward a shared concern. Caesar's dominance had no clear endpoint. Roman governance relied on rotation of office. Caesar's prolonged authority disrupted that rhythm. Even if he governed effectively, the precedent troubled those who thought in generational terms. If one man could hold such power, what prevented another, less restrained, from doing worse? This was not paranoia without basis. Rome's recent past had seen Sulla's dictatorship and proscriptions. Memory of autocracy was fresh. Caesar's clemency distinguished him from Sulla, but clemency depended on the ruler's character, not on institutional constraint. The Republic's defenders asked a structural question: should stability rely on personal virtue? Meanwhile, the public at large often viewed Caesar favorably. He provided grain distributions, public works, and spectacle. For many citizens, he represented order after chaos. Political elites debated liberty. Ordinary Romans often valued predictability. Thus emerged a divide between aristocratic anxiety and popular approval. Caesar stood at the center of this divide, perhaps aware of it, perhaps underestimating its depth. Great leaders sometimes misjudge not their enemy's strength, but their emotions. Rational reforms do not always soothe symbolic fears, and fear, in politics, seeks remedy. Conversations among certain senators shifted tone. Complaints became concerns. Concerns became discussions. Discussions edged toward conspiracy. Not all who worried about Caesar wanted violence, but some concluded that removal was the only safeguard for the Republic. They framed their thinking in Roman moral language: libertas, the freedom of citizens from domination; mos mearum, the ancestral tradition; duty to the state above loyalty to a man. Whether these convictions were pure or mixed with personal grievance is impossible to fully untangle. Human motives rarely separate cleanly. What is clear is this: Caesar's power had become not just a political fact, but a psychological weight on the Republic's elite. He had mastered war, he had mastered reform, but mastery of perception is the most fragile. The theater of power requires constant calibration. Too little authority invites challenge. Too much invites coalition against you. Caesar walked this narrow line with confidence, perhaps believing his achievements secured tolerance. Yet, history shows that dominance often isolates. As one rises above peers, honest counsel decreases. Applause grows louder, but warning voices grow fewer. By early 44 BCE, the stage was set, not for a battle, but for an act. The Republic still functioned, the Senate still met, Caesar still planned for the future. But in the shadows of Rome's marble halls, a group of men convinced themselves that history sometimes required a blade where argument failed. They believed they were not ending a life, but restoring a system. Whether they were right or tragically mistaken would soon be decided. Chapter 7. Julius Caesar, the Conspiracy of Virtue. Conspiracies rarely begin with daggers. They begin with justifications. By 44 BCE, a circle of Roman senators had reached a shared conclusion. Julius Caesar's dominance threatened the Republic's political equilibrium. Yet few among them saw themselves as villains. On the contrary, many believed they were acting in defense of libertas, the Roman ideal of freedom from personal rule. This is the paradox of political violence. Those who commit it often frame it as preservation, not destruction. The emerging conspiracy drew together men of varied motives. Some were former Pompeians, whom Caesar had pardoned. Others were long-standing Republicans, wary of concentrated authority. A few likely carried personal resentments or fears of marginalization. But to sustain cooperation, they needed a moral narrative. They found it in the language of tradition. Rome's identity was built on the rejection of kings. The story of Lucius Junius Brutus, who overthrew the last Roman king centuries earlier, was taught as civic myth. Tyrannicide could be framed as patriotic if it prevented monarchy. This cultural memory provided a powerful template. Among the conspirators, two figures stood out. Marcus Junius Brutus, respected, philosophical, associated with Stoic ideals. His ancestor was the very Brutus credited with ending Rome's monarchy. The symbolism was potent. If he joined, the act could appear principled rather than personal. Gaius Cassius Longinus, experienced, politically sharp, less idealistic, but highly persuasive. He helped organize the network and sustain momentum. Together, they anchored the movement, but the conspiracy extended to dozens of senators. Its breadth was deliberate. A small plot risked failure. A larger one diffused responsibility and signaled collective will. Still, secrecy was fragile. Rome was a city of rumor. The fact that the plot remained concealed suggests careful coordination, and perhaps that many Romans sensed tension but did not know its form. Meanwhile, Caesar continued his routines. He attended Senate sessions, reviewed plans, prepared for future campaigns. He reportedly received warnings and ominous signs, though ancient sources often dramatize such details. Whether he suspected danger is debated. What is likely is this: he did not believe the Senate would strike physically. Roman politics was ruthless, but assassination within the Senate House violated deep norms. Debate, exile, prosecutions were expected tools. Murder at the political center crossed a boundary. The conspirators concluded that timing mattered. Delay risked discovery. They selected the Ides of March, March 15th, 44 BCE, when Caesar was scheduled to attend a Senate meeting at the theater of Pompey. The location itself was layered with irony. Pompey, Caesar's former ally and rival, had his statue there. The Republic's past and present would intersect in one violent moment. The conspirators did not plan a coup or a regime change blueprint. Their goal was removal. They assumed or hoped that once Caesar was gone, the Republic's traditional mechanisms would rebalance. This assumption would prove historically consequential. On the chosen day, they gathered as usual. Senators carried concealed blades. Anxiety must have been palpable, though outwardly masked by routine. Political actors are trained in composure. Rome's elite understood performance. When Caesar arrived, he took his seat. A petition was presented to draw him into position. Then the circle tightened. One conspirator struck first. Others followed. Ancient accounts describe chaos, multiple blows, confusion, the shock of violence in a chamber of governance. Caesar reportedly resisted briefly, then ceased when he recognized familiar faces among the attackers. The famous line, "Et tu, brute," remains debated in authenticity, but its endurance reflects emotional truth more than literal record. He fell beneath Pompey's statue. Symbolism again shaped memory. The conqueror of Pompey dying at Pompey's monument. The dominant figure brought down by peers. The Republic defended through blood in its own hall. The conspirators had acted. But action is only the first half of consequence. They expected public approval. They imagined gratitude for restoring liberty. Some even proclaimed the death as a return of freedom. Yet outside the Senate, reaction was not triumphant, but uncertain. Shock outweighed celebration. Rome had removed a ruler. It had not prepared a replacement order. Political systems are not reset by subtraction alone. Removing a central figure can expose structural fractures rather than heal them. The conspirators had unity in opposition, but not in governance plans. And crucially, Caesar had supporters, veterans, citizens, allies, who benefited from his leadership. Their reactions would matter. The assassination answered one question. Could Caesar be stopped? Yes, but it opened a larger one. What happens after? The conspirators believed they had saved the Republic. History would soon test whether the Republic could save itself. Chapter 8. Julius Caesar, the aftershock of freedom. The death of a ruler does not end his influence, it releases it. When Julius Caesar fell on the Ides of March, 44 BCE, the conspirators believed they had performed a surgical act, move the dominant figure, and the Republic's natural balance would return. Instead, they triggered a political earthquake whose tremors would reshape Rome for generations. The immediate aftermath was not triumph, but confusion. The conspirators, blades still stained, reportedly proclaimed that Rome was free again. Yet their declaration met silence more than applause. Senators fled. Meetings dissolved. The city, accustomed to rumor but not to violence in its governing chamber, reacted with uncertainty. Freedom, it seemed, required explanation. Brutus and his allies had removed Caesar, but they had not secured institutions, the army, or the urban masses. They underestimated a crucial factor. Caesar's power had not rested on office alone. It rested on relationships, benefits, and loyalty networks. Many Romans had prospered under his rule. Many soldiers owed him land and reward. Many citizens associated him with stability. The conspirators had killed a man, not a system. Into this vacuum stepped Mark Antony, Caesar's ally and serving consul. Politically agile and emotionally perceptive, Antony recognized the moment's delicacy. Open retaliation could provoke chaos. Passive acceptance could erase Caesar's legacy. He chose calculation. A compromise emerged initially. Caesar's acts and appointments would remain valid to prevent administrative collapse. Amnesty would be granted to the conspirators to avoid immediate civil war. It was a temporary balancing act, trying to steady itself after shock. But emotion is a political force. At Caesar's funeral, Antony delivered a speech that became legendary. Whether later embellished or not, its effect is clear from historical outcomes. He reframed Caesar not as a tyrant, but as a benefactor cut down unjustly. He reportedly read portions of Caesar's will, revealing that Caesar left money to Roman citizens and opened his gardens to the public. This was more than tribute. It was narrative reclamation. Public sentiment shifted. Crowds mourned. Anger grew not against Caesar, but against those who killed him. The conspirators, expecting praise, found themselves politically exposed. Many soon left Rome for safety, heading to provinces where they could gather support. The Republic's defenders had become fugitives from public opinion. Then another figure entered the stage, young, careful, and underestimated, Gaius Octavius, Caesar's adopted heir, later known as Octavian. At only 18, he inherited Caesar's name and a portion of his political gravity. Adoption in Rome was a legal and symbolic transfer of legacy. By becoming Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, he positioned himself as continuity rather than novelty. Many initially dismissed him as a youth. History would prove that youth can be a strategic disguise. Octavian moved cautiously, building alliances, courting veterans, and aligning temporarily with Antony despite mutual suspicion. Their shared interest was defeating the conspirators and stabilizing their positions. Thus formed the second triumvirate: Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. Unlike the earlier informal alliance of Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, this one had legal standing. It granted extraordinary powers to its members to restore the Republic. The phrase was ironic. Extraordinary power was again justified in the name of restoration. Proscriptions followed lists of enemies marked for death and property confiscation. Political violence returned, harsher than under Caesar. Even Cicero, the famed orator and defender of republican ideals, fell victim. The Republic had been defended through assassination. Now it was being restored through sanctioned killing. The conspirators, including Brutus and Cassius, gathered forces in the east. The confrontation came at Philippi in 42 BCE. There, the armies of the triumvirs defeated the forces of the assassins. Both Brutus and Cassius died by suicide, ending the organized resistance of Caesar's killers. Their cause, liberty, did not die with them, but its political vehicle did. Rome was left not with restored balance, but with new strongmen. The pattern repeated: concentration of power, justified by crisis. The Republic's forms endured, but its competitive equilibrium eroded further. Caesar's assassination had aimed to halt one man's dominance. Instead, it accelerated the Republic's transformation. His ghost lingered, not as superstition, but as influence. His name mobilized armies. His memory justified policies. His legacy shaped claims to legitimacy. Even in death, he remained a political force. This is the paradox of historical figures of immense stature. Removing them does not remove their impact. It multiplies interpretations of it. The Republic had feared monarchy. Now it faced something subtler: the gradual emergence of singular rule under different titles. And in the quiet calculus of power, one young heir was learning quickly. Octavian observed Antony's charisma, the Senate's weaknesses, and the people's desires. He was less dazzling than Caesar, but perhaps more patient. The story was no longer about saving the Republic as it had been. It was about defining what Rome would become. Caesar's blood had marked the Senate floor, but the future of Rome would be written by those who claimed his legacy. Chapter 9: Julius Caesar, the inheritance of power. Empires do not inherit peace, they inherit momentum. After the defeat of Brutus and Cassius at Philippi, the immediate enemies of Caesar's legacy were gone. But the question of Rome's future remained unresolved. The Republic still existed in name, yet real authority increasingly rested in the hands of a few. The second triumvirate, Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus, had united to defeat the assassins. Now they faced a familiar Roman problem: how to share power in a culture that rewarded dominance. Their alliance, like the first triumvirate before it, was built on necessity, not trust. The Roman world was divided among them. Antony took the eastern provinces, rich and culturally complex. Octavian managed the western territories, including Italy, where veterans demanded land and stability. Lepidus held Africa, but gradually faded in influence, more placeholder than contender. This division was practical, but it was also temporary. Rome's political tradition offered little room for long-term power sharing. Meanwhile, Caesar's name remained a political asset. Octavian used it skillfully. As the adopted son, he styled himself Devia Filius, son of the divine, after Caesar was officially deified by the Senate. This was a masterstroke. It blended religion and legitimacy, presenting Octavian not just as heir, but as continuation. Religion in Rome was civic, not private. Divinity could reinforce political authority. Antony, for his part, leaned into the Eastern world's traditions. His relationship with Cleopatra, the seventh of Egypt, was both personal and strategic. Egypt's wealth and grain were critical. Yet in Rome, perceptions mattered. Association with an Eastern queen fed narratives that Antony was drifting from Roman values. Politics is often shaped less by reality than by framing. Octavian excelled at framing. He portrayed himself as defender of Roman tradition against Eastern influence. Antony was depicted as enthralled by Cleopatra, prioritizing Alexandria over Rome. Whether fair or exaggerated, the narrative gained traction among Roman elites and citizens alike. The rivalry sharpened. The Republic became a backdrop to personal competition. Tensions culminated in the naval confrontation at Actium in 31 BCE. Octavian's forces, commanded by Agrippa, defeated Antony and Cleopatra. The battle was decisive, not just militarily, but symbolically. It framed Octavian as restorer of Roman dignity and stability. Antony and Cleopatra later died in Egypt, ending the last major challenge to Octavian's supremacy. What followed was not a declaration of kingship. Rome still resisted that word. Instead, Octavian carefully accumulated titles, powers, and honors while maintaining republican forms. He presented himself as princeps first citizen, not monarch. This subtlety mattered. Romans could accept hierarchy if it preserved the language of tradition. Thus emerged what historians call the principata system, where one man held predominant authority, while republican institutions continued to function in appearance. And here lies Caesar's enduring influence. The path Octavian walked had been cleared by Caesar's precedents. Caesar showed that military loyalty could override senatorial resistance. He demonstrated that reform and centralization could win public support. He revealed that the republic's structures could be stretched without immediate collapse. Octavian learned from both Caesar's successes and his mistakes. He avoided overt displays that suggested kingship. He shared credit symbolically. He moved slowly where Caesar had moved boldly. If Caesar was the storm, Octavian was the climate shift that followed. By 27 BCE, Octavian received the title Augustus, marking the beginning of what we now call the Roman Empire. The Republic was not formally abolished, but its competitive core had been replaced by stable predominance. Many Romans accepted this trade. Civil war had been devastating. Stability was attractive. Thus, ironically, the assassination meant to save the Republic accelerated its transformation. The effort to prevent one-man rule made Romans more willing to accept a refined version of it. Caesar did not live to become emperor, but his actions made emperors possible. His legacy was not merely conquest or reform, it was structural change. He exposed the limits of the old system. He forced Rome to confront its scale and complexity. He revealed that a city-state constitution struggled to govern a Mediterranean empire. History often credits Augustus with founding the empire, but Caesar was its necessary precursor. The inheritance of power is not only about titles, it is about lessons learned, and Rome had learned through blood and upheaval that its future would not resemble its past. Still, Caesar's story was not finished. His memory would be shaped, debated, and repurposed for generations. His name Caesar would become a title, then a concept, then a symbol of rule itself. Few individuals leave marks so deep that language changes because of them. Caesar was one. Yet beyond the legend lay a human question. Did he seek to end the Republic or to make it functional for a new age? The answer depends on perspective. The consequence is undeniable. Rome had crossed from republic to empire, and Caesar stood at the hinge of that transformation. Chapter 10: Julius Caesar, the making of a legend. A man dies once. A legend is constructed many times. After Julius Caesar's assassination, his physical life ended, but his symbolic life expanded. Memory in Rome was not passive recollection, it was political currency. How Caesar was remembered shaped how power was justified. Almost immediately, competing narratives formed. To his supporters, Caesar was a visionary reformer, a stabilizer after chaos, a leader who extended citizenship, reformed governance, and showed mercy to defeated enemies. His assassination, in this view, was ingratitude, masked as principle. To his critics, he was a warning, a man whose accumulation of honors threatened the Republic's equality. His death was framed as a tragic necessity to protect liberty. Both narratives coexisted. Both influenced Rome's identity. The Senate's decision to deify Caesar was pivotal. A comet appearing shortly after his death, interpreted as a divine sign, was presented as proof of his ascent to the heavens. Whether coincidence or convenient symbolism, it reinforced his elevation beyond mortality. Temples were dedicated, priests were appointed. His image gained sacred dimension. Deification did more than honor him, it reshaped Roman political culture. If a leader could become divine, political authority and religious reverence could intertwine. This development would later support imperial ideology, where emperors balanced human governance with sacred aura. Caesar thus became not just a historical figure, but a reference point for legitimacy. Writers and historians further molded his image. Some emphasized his brilliance, his speed in campaign, clarity in writing, and administrative vision. Others highlighted ambition and constitutional disruption. Ancient historiography was rarely neutral. It reflected the author's own political climates. Even language preserved him. Caesar evolved into a title Kaiser, surrecoing across centuries and cultures. His name became synonymous with rulership itself. Few individuals achieve that level of linguistic legacy. Yet beyond titles and temples, Caesar's real legend rested on three pillars: military mastery. His Gallic campaigns displayed operational innovation, logistics, and psychological warfare. He understood morale, speed, and narrative control. His commentaries influenced how later generals thought about reporting and propaganda. Political adaptability. He navigated alliances, public opinion, and institutional constraints with rare flexibility. He could be charming, ruthless, patient, or bold as circumstances required. Symbolic awareness. He understood that perception shaped authority. Public games, mercy to enemies, visible confidence, these were tools of leadership as much as laws and legions. Yet, legend simplifies. Real lives are complex. Caesar was not solely a hero, nor solely a tyrant. He was a product of a competitive aristocratic culture, a collapsing republican balance, and a rapidly expanding empire. His ambition aligned with Rome's expansionist momentum. His centralization mirrored the administrative needs of scale. In other words, he was both exceptional and contextual. History sometimes attributes change to individuals when broader forces are also at work. Caesar mattered enormously, but he operated within currents larger than himself: economic shifts, military professionalization, social inequality, and political rivalry. Still, individuals can accelerate history. Caesar did. His assassination fixed his image at a dramatic peak. Had he lived longer, his rule might have normalized, perhaps even faded in uniqueness. Death at a moment of dominance crystallized his myth. Martyrdom, even unintended, strengthens memory. For later Romans, Caesar became a measuring stick. Emperors compared themselves to him. Critics invoked him as warning. Reformers cited him as precedent. His life became a case study in the possibilities and perils of singular leadership. And beyond Rome, his story traveled. Medieval chroniclers, Renaissance thinkers, and modern historians all revisited him. Each era reinterpreted Caesar through its own concerns: monarchy, republicanism, dictatorship, reform. Thus, Caesar's legend is not static. It evolves with the questions societies ask. Was he ending a failing system or undermining a viable one? Was he driven by personal glory or structural necessity? Was his clemency humane or strategic? These questions persist because his life sits at the intersection of power and principle. One certainty remains: Caesar changed the trajectory of Western political development. The shift from republic to empire influenced governance models for centuries. Ideas about authority, reform, and legitimacy were all shaped in his shadow. A legend, however, is not just what a man did. It is what later generations need him to represent. And Rome, facing the memory of civil war and the reality of empire, needed Caesar to be both warning and foundation. He became both. Chapter 11, Julius Caesar Judgment across time. History does not deliver a single verdict. It conducts an ongoing trial. In the generations after Julius Caesar's death, Romans and later historians debated not only what he did, but what he meant. His life became a mirror in which different eras examined their own political anxieties. For Romans living under the empire, Caesar could be seen as the necessary predecessor, the man who revealed the Republic's limits and made stable rule possible. Augustus' long reign brought relative peace, prosperity, and administrative coherence. From this vantage point, Caesar's disruption looked like painful but necessary surgery. Yet, for defenders of republican ideals, ancient and modern alike, Caesar represented the danger of charismatic concentration of power. They argued that his dominance weakened shared governance and encouraged future autocracy. To them, he was less a healer than an accelerant. Both interpretations persist because Caesar stood at a constitutional crossroads. The Roman Republic had been designed for a city-state managing regional influence, not a vast multicultural empire. Annual magistracies and elite competition worked when scale was limited. Expansion multiplied complexity, longer supply lines, professional armies, provincial administration, and economic disparities. The system strained under success. Caesar did not invent that strain. He confronted it. Some scholars emphasize that his reforms, calendar correction, provincial oversight, debt measures, veteran settlements, were practical responses to real problems. Others stress that his method of centralizing authority set precedents that weakened institutional balance. The truth likely lies in tension between structure and personality. Institutions shape leaders, but leaders also shape institutions. Caesar's clemency policy illustrates this duality. By forgiving enemies, he reduced cycles of revenge and promoted reconciliation. Yet clemency also reinforced hierarchy. The forgiver stands above the forgiven. What appeared humane could also entrench dominance. Similarly, his acceptance of honors might be read as political necessity in a culture that expressed gratitude symbolically, or as gradual normalization of supremacy. Judging historical figures requires separating outcome from intention. But intention is rarely fully recoverable. Ancient sources complicate matters. Writers like Suetonius, Plutarch, and Appian recorded anecdotes, speeches, and character sketches. But they wrote decades later, often with literary flair. Their works mix documentation with moral storytelling. They inform us, but they also interpret. Thus, Caesar reaches us filtered through narrative. Across centuries, thinkers projected their own concerns onto him. During periods wary of dictatorship, he appears as warning. During times valuing decisive reform, he appears as model. Political philosophy often uses him as a case study in the balance between liberty and stability. This adaptability is part of his historical power. Few figures become archetypes. Caesar did. He represents the perennial dilemma. When systems stagnate, should they be preserved or transformed? If transformation requires concentrated authority, is it justified? These are not Roman questions alone. They recur in many societies facing scale, crisis, or inequality. Yet beyond theory lies the human dimension. Caesar was not an abstract force. He was a man who wrote letters, felt loyalties, showed ambition, and navigated rivalry. He enjoyed wit, valued reputation, and took calculated risks. His life was lived day by day, not as destiny, but as decision. History later connected those decisions into a trajectory. In judging him, one must also judge the environment that produced him. Roman political culture rewarded competition, glory, and public display. Military success translated into political leverage. Patronage networks shaped careers. In such a system, extraordinary ambition was not anomaly, it was currency. Caesar played the game at its highest level, perhaps too well for the system to contain. And so his story resists simple moralizing. He was neither pure tyrant nor pure savior. He was a catalyst accelerating transitions already underway. The Republic's fall cannot be blamed on one life, but his life hastened its transformation. This complexity explains why his story endures. He invites debate rather than closure. In the end, historical judgment is less about final answers and more about informed perspective. Caesar's legacy asks readers to weigh stability against freedom, reform against precedent, charisma against constraint. Every era returns to him because every era faces versions of these choices. Thus, Caesar's trial across time remains open. The jury changes with each generation. The evidence is reread with new questions. And perhaps that is his final distinction. He is not just part of history, he is part of how history thinks about power. Chapter 12. Julius Caesar, the limits of glory. Glory is powerful, but it is not permanent. Julius Caesar spent his life pursuing gloria, the Roman ideal of fame earned through achievement, remembered by future generations. In this, he succeeded beyond almost any of his contemporaries. His name crossed languages, centuries, and political systems. Yet his story also reveals the limits of glory. He won battles, but could not control how victory reshaped politics. He gained power, but could not guarantee its acceptance. He secured loyalty, but could not eliminate fear. Glory magnifies a leader's reach, but it also magnifies scrutiny. By the end of his life, Caesar stood at a height few Romans had reached. He had conquered Gaul, defeated rivals, reformed institutions, and centralized authority. Yet the very scale of his success created a fragile position. The more singular his status became, the more the Republic had to adapt or resist. Rome struggled to adapt. Some chose resistance. His assassination demonstrated a harsh truth. Personal brilliance cannot fully protect against structural tension. When a political system lacks mechanisms to integrate exceptional individuals, it often reacts defensively. Caesar encountered that boundary. He pushed it and paid for it. Still, limits do not equal failure. History is not a scoreboard. Caesar did not achieve all he intended, but he changed the trajectory of Rome. His actions helped shift governance from a competitive aristocratic republic to a more centralized imperial system. Whether one views that shift as loss or evolution depends on values and perspective. What is undeniable is his impact. Few individuals so clearly mark a turning point. After Caesar, Roman politics could not return to earlier simplicity. Power, once concentrated, rarely redistributes easily. His life made that visible. Yet there is also a quieter lesson in his story. For all his campaigns and reforms, Caesar remained human, subject to miscalculation, reliant on alliances, vulnerable to perception. He could read battlefields brilliantly, but the emotional terrain of elite politics proved less predictable. This is the limit of strategic genius. Humans are not legions. They do not move in formation. He may have believed clemency would neutralize hostility. In some cases, it did. In others, it bred quiet resentment. He may have assumed visible honors would legitimize authority. Instead, they heightened suspicion. Greatness does not eliminate risk. It often concentrates it. And yet, Caesar's life was not defined by his death alone. His writings influenced rhetoric and military reporting. His calendar reforms structured timekeeping for millennia. His model of leadership shaped imperial governance. His name became synonymous with rule itself. Even his failures were instructive. They taught successors what to avoid. Augustus, his heir, learned from Caesar's fateless overt dominance, more symbolic humility, slower consolidation. In that sense, Caesar's limits became Augustus' guide. Thus, Caesar's story is not only about one man's ambition, it is about how systems respond to extraordinary individuals. It is about how success can destabilize as well as elevate. It is about the tension between personal capacity and institutional design. Glory, in the Roman sense, aimed at immortality through memory. By that measure, Caesar succeeded. But immortality in memory is different from control over legacy. Once a figure enters history, interpretation belongs to others. Caesar became symbol, lesson, warning, inspiration, sometimes all at once. Perhaps the final limit of glory is this: it ensures remembrance, not agreement. And so his life closes not with a simple moral, but with a question that echoes across eras. When a system outgrows its design, who should change the system or the leader? Caesar answered in action. Rome answered in consequence. History continues the dialogue.